Oh, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 2Bob. My name is Craig. This will be my very last video. This is my farewell video. YouTube have done a fantastic job in burying my content. Well, that's my feeling anyway. Not just that, but it's just basically a lack of interest that's shown towards my content. That's why I'm just going to shut up shop now. This will be my very last video. So this is my farewell video. It's a little bit sad. I'm disappointed. A little bit sad at the same time because I would have really liked to have keep going with this, but there's no point. You know, I've done about 4 videos. I've done globalism, mainstream media, free will, and there's another one I did. I can't remember offhand. 0 views. You know what I mean? And that just tells me YouTube is obviously involved in the suppression of some of my content, and I'm pretty sure I know why. But I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So this is going to be basically a summary, really, of the videos I've done in the past, where I am. Now, the last video I did, it's got a massive 0 views, thanks to YouTube, was the big picture. In that video, I pretty much discussed what I really believe from start to present day, how the universe began to exist and what God's plan is for us. And I just gave you my 2Bob as to what humanity's direction generally is. And as I said, I still believe we're sleepwalking towards globalism. Basically, the world that we're heading in, our nation states are under threat because every single nation on this earth is being upheld by here. We believe in our respective countries. You take away that belief, you take away our national identity. It's our national identity which upholds the fabric of every country, and every country plays its independent role, its unique role in defending our fabric of humanity. It's our fabric of humanity, that's what really counts. Without our beautiful fabric of humanity, we just go from here humanity down to an animal level, and we just sink to a Mad Max type of society. And that could happen if we lose our humanity. And the best chance of losing our humanity is to lose our sense of national pride. That's what globalism is fundamentally all about. Anyway, so that was what I was leading to at the end of the big picture post I did. So the issue I want to talk about now is psychological hoax. Psychological hoax. I'll give you a few examples of it, and then I'll give you my conclusions at the very end. What is a psychological hoax? Well, what is a hoax? A hoax is basically a scam or some kind of activity that's designed to trick you into doing something you wouldn't normally do. And so, for example, part ways with your money. That's a typical scam, typical hoax. So what's a psychological hoax? Well, a psychological hoax is basically something which tricks you into changing your attitude. And once you change your attitude, you're then deemed a victim of a psychological hoax. Now, as I said to you before, the mainstream media is a system of control. It's fair and balanced when it comes to the vast majority of issues, but within a very small spectrum of issues that they're not fair and balanced. And so that's where the psychological hoaxes are delivered through that small spectrum of activity carried out by the mainstream media. Now, mainstream media is a tool. It's a tool working at the behest of globalists in order to dominate the way we think and suppress ideas that threaten to expose the nature of the mainstream media, and therefore expose the nature of the people that are behind the mainstream media, which are various globalists. Now, I'm going to give you 2 examples of psychological hoax: 9/11 and COVID-19. So 9/11, we'll start with 9/11. Well, 9/11 is basically a reference to the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. We're told that 19 hijackers hijacked 4 planes, or 3 planes, and crashed them into various targets around the United States. Now, we can all agree it was an act of terrorism. The question, who was the actual terrorists? Well, reports tell us that of the 19 hijackers, about 10 of them are still alive. So it wasn't these hijackers. You know, I mean, there's obviously more to the story than what meets the eye. Now, the mainstream media, they were very quick to give a narrative, which is what I just said, the 19 hijackers. jackers hijacking the planes. Now let's talk about the World Trade Center. We all saw planes crashing to the World Trade Center. We were told that the buildings collapse. The top part of the building and the lower part of the building. The top part of the building and either building collapsed into the lower part of the building, right? But I'll submit to you that's just baloney. It doesn't make any sense. If the top part of the building was collapsing into the lower part of the building, the lower part of the building would encounter a compression force. There'd be evidence of compression within the lower section of the buildings. But there's no evidence of compression. Now, what I saw on an ABC report, each floor, it was a lot easier to see on the North Tower, a bit harder to see on the South Tower. But in the case of the North Tower, each floor just was blown up one by one, right down to the bottom. It was just blown up, pulverized. That's what I saw. That's not evidence of compression. That's just evidence of some kind of demolition job. It's really, really simple. Now, this evidence of compression should be there. It doesn't matter what the densities are of the weights of the sections which fell into which section. For example, if you have a bucket full of feathers, you grab a rock and you throw it into a bucket full of feathers, the rock will fall, but the feathers will compress. See, the rock won't make it to the bottom. The rock will end up sitting on a bunch of compressed feathers, right? Doesn't matter how light the feathers are, or whatever it is that's falling into whatever medium. The medium that the top bit is falling into would encounter evidence of compression. We never saw that in the World Trade Centers. Not just that, it's the top bit that blew up in midair. It disintegrated as it was falling to the ground. How do you justify that? There's no force on top of it acting upon the upper section. The upper section just simply collapsed. It just blew up in midair. So I think it's fair to say that the buildings were brought down via a controlled demolition. That's the most common sense approach to all this. As I said to you before, an ABC report, one of the reporters got very close to the North Tower. Luckily, they didn't get too close, and they looked up and you can see it. Each floor was destroyed, one floor after another, after another, after another, after another, all the way to the bottom. That's a controlled demolition. And not just that, the buildings fell at near free fall speed. That's what you see in an actual controlled demolition. Now, in addition to the World Trade Centers, you had Building 7. Now, Larry Silverstein said on the PBS documentary, Building 7 was pulled. That's a term referring to a controlled demolition. Controlled demolition, so Larry Silverstein admitted on mainstream media that Building 7 was pulled. It was destroyed via a controlled demolition. Now, a plane didn't crash into Building 7. This is a 50-story skyscraper. Now, in most cities, this would be the tallest building in the landscape. And this building, 50 floors, just collapsed. Controlled demolition. North Tower, South Tower, Building 7. All brought down via controlled demolition. There's no doubt about that at all. Now, let's move on to the Pentagon. Again, we all saw the facade of the Pentagon on fire. We saw the smoke billowing out of the hole. But one thing that the media doesn't tell you is that the actual damage profile, once all the smoke subsided, you can see the actual hole. The hole was simply too small for the type of plane that we're told crashed into it. I think it's a Boeing 757, just comparatively speaking, to say that wide, wingtip to wingtip, but the hole's only that wide. How can something that wide fit into a hole which is only that wide? You know, if someone told you a story, if I come up to you and said, I threw a rock into a wall, and I threw it so hard it penetrated the wall, but then you looked at the hole, and the hole was only half the size of the rock, you have reasons to disregard the story. It's rubbish. Right? It's the same with 9/11. A plane obviously didn't strike the facade of the Pentagon. There's some other explanation for it. The purpose of this video is not to postulate alternative explanations. Well, I kind of did with the controlled demolition, admittedly, but that's all I'll do. So we have two good reasons which clearly points to 9/11 being a psychological hoax. Obviously, it was designed, it was a theatre. It was a theatrical event designed to create a tremendous amount of fear, and that fear would be the catalyst for a change in attitude. A change in attitude towards the idea we need some kind of global response to this global terrorism issue, because terrorism is globally far-reaching, isn't it? So we need some kind of global solution to it. Not only that, the government also lied to us about the speed of the planes that crashed into either tower. We were told that the speed of the plane was just under 800 kilometres an hour, which is kind of the same speed the plane would be flying at flight altitude. But a top of plane that struck a typical normal passenger airliner, it can't travel that fast too close to the ground. See, a plane when it takes off, it works up to that speed, gets the flight altitude, then comes down. But it can't travel. They've done experiments on this, and a plane, it just is not able to fly at that speed. The air is just simply too dense. Okay, it's just too dense. It just didn't happen. Okay, so obviously 9/11 it's just an event. It's a psychological hoax carried out by globalists to instill a change in attitude in the way we think. Again, a change in attitude away from nationalism, away from our national sense of identity, and on towards some kind of global authoritative system. That's fundamentally what 9/11 was about. Now, let's now move on to COVID-19. Now, unlike 9/11, which is based on an actual theatrical event where people needlessly died on this day, and my full condolences goes out to all their families, COVID-19 was based pretty much on nothing. Really nothing except fear-mongering on television. Now, COVID-19, the COVID-19 fanfare really began in Wuhan, China. We saw videos of people dropping dead on the streets, and we're told that's due to a virus. But just kind of use a little bit of common sense here. If that was the case, and these people dropped dead because of a virus, and COVID-19 originated from China, you'd see a trail of bodies going from Wuhan to the various airports in China, which took people to various places around the world, and that's how the virus supposedly spread. It's just ridiculous. We didn't see a trail of bodies going from Wuhan to various airports. It was only it was a theatre. Can't see, it's just a small theatrical event. Yes, I'm not arguing that people didn't die. My condolences goes out to anyone that was affected by any of these scams, but we have to call it out for what it is. It's a lie. Now, before I move on with COVID, let's consider the word COVID itself. COVID stands for coronavirus disease. Just think that is just ridiculous offhand. Coronavirus disease. A virus creates a disease. How can a virus be a disease at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. Clearly, that alone tells me there's a psychological element to all this. All right? So, start off in Wuhan, China. The media even tells us this. That's what the narrative, the globalist narrative through the media, they tell us it started in China and it spread to the various countries around the world. So people were dying on the streets in China, but interestingly enough, people stopped dying. Once the virus left China and went to various countries around the world, the dying kind of stopped, but the case numbers increased. See, the case numbers increased in anywhere in the world. Case numbers kind of increased in a linear fashion, which is unusual, because if it was an actual virus, the case numbers would be a more geometric rise to it. But anyway, so the critical thing about COVID-19 is that although the case numbers are going up like this, allegedly, the actual rate of hospitalizations was relatively constant. To pardon the expression, it was flatlining. So it was relatively constant. It maybe would have gone up a little bit, maybe. But there's definitely no pandemic. That's the critical thing to get out of it. There's no pandemic. Okay, so I can only speak for what happened in Australia. Obviously, I'm an Australian citizen. And so COVID arrived in Australia around February, March, and it really took off from there, all the pandemonium. But the only evidence for a virus was on television. That was it. There's nothing else. It was all fear-mongering. It's a demonstration of the media's power to assert power and dominion over the way people think. And that's fundamentally what COVID-19 was about. It's a psychological scam to basically train people to act in a manner which is conducive towards a global government, away from your national pride onto some global authoritative source. In this case was the World Health Organization. Now, although hospitalizations were flatlining, they still made us wear the masks, they still made us social distance, but neither of those two things either worked, because the hospitalizations didn't change at all. It was low to begin with. It was just ridiculous. But the worst part of it was the lockdowns. People were shut out of work. They were sent home. Some people were sent home without pay, and companies suffered big time. Although the governments helped some of their people, didn't help everyone. Now, you still have bills to pay. Even if there was an actual pandemic, these lockdowns are no good. They don't serve any positive purpose whatsoever. Think about it. Locking down a person, you create stress. Taking away a person's money, taking away a person's income creates stress, and that stress then becomes a catalyst to receiving a virus of any kind. So even if COVID-19 was an actual virus, which I don't think it was at all, even if it was an actual virus, then these lockdowns simply played a role in getting people to catch this virus and become sick. I mean, the people that get behind these measures, I mean, there's a psychological element to all this. I don't believe that doctors are dumb, politicians are dumb, social workers are dumb. I just think they're being controlled. I think most people are unaware of the power that the mainstream media wields over the human mind. And as I said to you before, and I'll say it again, as soon as you realise that the media is a system of control, as soon as you realise it, just like that, it loses its power over you. It's no longer a system of control. That is the most critical thing I want you to get out of any of my posts. Number one thing, just realise television is a system of control. Now, obviously there was no pandemic. Case numbers were going up. Hospitalizations were kind of relatively flat. And so here comes the virus now, this super duper virus. And didn't they just worship this virus? You know, companies were so eager to lay people off, to sack people for not taking the virus, and politicians were just so happy just to get this virus into people's arms, and wasn't it a scam? And that's when the dying started. That's when actual hospitalizations began to rise, after the vaccine was introduced. And that's what they won't tell you. The media will not tell you. And this platform that I'm using, YouTube, it's not much better. I'll talk more about YouTube in a minute. I mean, YouTube censored people. It deplatformed people for speaking out. No, the relatives of people who were adversely affected by these vaccines, and YouTube just shut them off. You know what I mean? And they were shunned by society. Man, I'm just completely and totally disgusted by how society in general acted in this. There's no pandemic. There's absolutely nothing except for the fear-mongering you saw on mainstream television. You turn the television off, you turn COVID-19 off. It's really that simple. Unbelievable, eh? Anyway, the mind absolutely boggles. Anyway, I'm suspecting that this video is going to be suppressed like many other videos I've done, with big zero views, the big donut. I've had a few donuts now. 8 billion people in the world. You really think that no one at all is interested in the mainstream media or globalism or any other topic I've talked about? I've talked about free will. I've got 1 view. Come on, it's being suppressed. YouTube, just like the mainstream media, is a system of control. All you YouTubers out there, you're free to act within this prison, all right? That's all it is. YouTube is like a prison. See, I'm speaking outside this prison. That's why I'm being suppressed. Now, I'm surprised that YouTube hasn't actually cancelled my account, but I'm going to not at the same time, because this is probably the next level of suppression. It's to make you think that you're free, but you're not. Okay, so that's COVID-19 covered. Now I want to move on to climate change. Climate change is that's another scam, but that's kind of comical, really, because there's a documentary I'd like you to watch, The Great Global Warming Swindle. The Great Global Warming Swindle. Okay, there are a dozen scientists that are interviewed in that documentary, and they go into great detail, and collectively they show you that the whole thing's just a scam. The critical thing for you to get out of this is that it's the sun. The sun is the main driver of temperature changes on this earth. Yes, you have summers, winters, temperature-wise, right? Some summers are hotter than others. Some winters are colder than others, or hotter than others, and there's changes. And it's all related to the sunspot activity on the sun, right? The thing you need to realise is that the extent of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere follows temperature. It's not the other way around. So we're hoodwinked into believing that CO2, as the CO2 increases, so do this temperature. It's not that at all. It's the other way around. Actually, there's an 800-year time lag between the rise in temperature and CO2 increases. And that's because much of the CO2 is locked up within the oceans. Now, if you don't believe me, just watch the documentary. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, because I'd rather you actually watch the documentary itself. The Great Global Warming Swindle. There's about a dozen scientists that were interviewed, and they all give their own perspective. And when you put the perspectives together, as they have in this video, it's an excellent video. It's actually on YouTube. I'm surprised that YouTube hasn't suppressed it. It's an excellent video, and clearly the whole climate change thing is just a lie. It's just another scam, okay? Now, just before I finish up, I talked about aliens in Area 51. So the mainstream media is not the only organisation that delivers these scams to people. Some of it's just directly through government organisations such as Area 51. It's just an installation, one of many that produces exotic technologies, and it's these exotic technologies that are used to create this global theatre of effects. Now, we're seeing strange objects in the sky, we're seeing lasers, we're seeing strange phenomena. Can't be explained. And you have various YouTube sites that look at these and question, are they aliens? What's going on here? And what they do is they're increasing the mystique associated with these effects, increases the sense of anxiety towards the idea that we need to believe in some kind of global governance. That's what it's all about. That's what 9/11 is about, using terror. COVID-19 using the fear of catching a virus. Climate change with the fear of heating up the earth. And now you have aliens in Area 51. It's just the fear of an alien invasion. These are just fears designed to exacerbate a sense of anxiety, which leads to the need to have some kind of global governance. That's what life is about. Okay. Yeah, so it is a little bit sad. All this is coming to an end. I would have really liked to have had some conversations with people out there. 8 billion people on this earth, and I can't be the only one that really wants to talk about these issues. I know I'm not. And again, just peruse my channel, TWOBOB. TWO, capital B, capital O, capital B. I'll just say that again. So capital T, small w, small o, capital B, capital O, capital B. That's the name of my channel. And just watch the videos on that channel, because the good stuff's been suppressed. It really is. Anyway, I'm not going to take too much of your time. This is a farewell video. So again, I believe that God is behind this. It's God's plan to have this world separated into 250 odd nation states. Each nation represents an axiom of security in preserving the fabric of our humanity. It's a belief in our respective countries that upholds this security. Take away that belief, and all we have is a downward evolution, de-evolution from humanity to animal, to humanity from the society we have now. It's not perfect, but it's much better than a Mad Max society, which we're headed towards if we don't really think about what we believe. Take responsibility for what you believe, and remember, as soon as you realise that the mainstream media is a system of control, just like that, it loses its power over you. It no longer is a system of control. That is so critical. I cannot stress how critical that is. Please just take responsibility for what you believe. It's hard to believe at first, but I believe there's a God that loves you. That's not easy to understand or embrace. I know that's not. But find it in your heart. Just find it in your heart to rise above the media, this media system. It's the number one weapon that these globalists are using to allow us to march towards globalism and therefore towards our doom, our eradication of the human soul. Anyway, I bid you all farewell. This is my last video, and YouTube have done a fantastic job in suppressing this content, but this content is like treasure. One day it's going to be found, and I hope, the further they bury the content, whoever finds it, to get there, they've gone a journey themselves already. And I wish many blessings on anyone that finds this material. I really do. I hope God is with you all the way. Okay, I bid you farewell for the last time. Over and out.